In the days when the kingdom of Israel was divided and the hearts of the people were slowly turning away from God, a man was born who would change the course of history. His name was Ahab, son of King Omri, a strong ruler who secured his power but also opened dangerous doors to idolatry. From his birth, Ahab grew up surrounded by power, wealth, and political decisions that shaped his character. The exact year of his birth is unknown, but it is clear that his life was deeply marked by ambition and by influences that would lead him far from the right path. Omri, his father, was an influential king who established the city of Samaria as the capital. He was a firm leader, but not faithful to God. From a young age, Ahab watched how power was maintained through alliances, strategies, and decisions that did not always seek the will of God. This planted in him a distorted view of leadership. Ahab did not grow up as an ordinary young man. He was educated as a prince. He learned about war, politics, and the administration of a kingdom. But something was missing in his training. He did not learn to fear God or to obey his commands. His heart began to lean toward what was convenient, not what was right. When the time came to take the throne, Ahab already had a defined personality. He was not weak in character, but he was weak in conviction. He was a man capable of ruling, but unable to resist the influence of others. This weakness would become his greatest problem. Ahab became king of Israel and ruled from Samaria. His reign lasted about 22 years. During that time, he made decisions that would lead him to be remembered as one of the most wicked kings of Israel. One of the most important decisions of his life was his marriage to Jezebel, daughter of the king of the Sidonians. Jezebel was not only a foreign woman, but also a devoted worshipper of the god Baal. This marriage was not based on love, but on political alliance. That moment marked the beginning of a dark period in Ahab's life and in the history of Israel. Jezebel quickly began to influence her husband. With determination and a strong character, she introduced the worship of Baal into the kingdom. Ahab, instead of resisting, allowed it. Not only did he allow it, but he also supported the construction of temples and altars for Baal. This act was a direct offense against God. The people of Israel began to divide. Some remained faithful, but many followed the example of their king. Idolatry grew, and with it, spiritual corruption. Ahab did not only sin by allowing idolatry, he went further. He became an active promoter of these practices. He built an altar to Baal in Samaria and allowed the prophets of God to be persecuted. It was a time of darkness. In the middle of this situation, an unexpected figure appeared. A man who did not fear the king or the queen. His name was Elijah. This prophet would become the voice of God in the middle of chaos. Elijah appeared before Ahab with a clear and direct message. He announced that there would be no rain in the land for years as a punishment for idolatry. It was a divine judgment. Ahab did not receive this message well. Instead of repenting, he became angry. He saw Elijah as his enemy. He blamed him for the problems of the kingdom, without recognizing his own responsibility. Meanwhile, the drought began. The land dried up. The fields stopped producing. Hunger started to spread. The people suffered. But Ahab did not change. He looked for human solutions. He sent men to search for water and grass. He traveled through distant lands, but nothing worked. The drought continued, just as Elijah had said. This period revealed the true nature of the king. Instead of humbling himself, he hardened his heart. He held on to his decisions and continued under the influence of Jezebel. During this time, Jezebel made an even more cruel decision. She ordered the persecution and execution of the prophets of God. Many were killed. Others had to hide to survive. The kingdom became a dangerous place for those who followed God. Ahab knew what was happening, but he did nothing to stop it. His silence became part of his sin. Even in the middle of all this, God did not abandon his people. He prepared a decisive moment. a confrontation that would show who the true God was. That moment had not yet come. Meanwhile, Ahab continued ruling, making decisions that pushed him further away from the right path. His life was marked by power, but also by a deep lack of spiritual direction. He had children, including Ahaziah and Joram, who would also become part of the kingdom's history. But his legacy would not be one of justice or faith, but of disobedience. The name of Ahab was becoming a symbol of corruption, and the worst was still to come. The destiny of this king would not only affect his own life, but an entire nation. Every decision he made brought him closer to a future that no one could escape. The sky was closed, the land was dry, the people were divided, and the king was lost. The story had only just begun. The drought continued to consume the land. The rivers had turned to dust, and the animals collapsed without strength. The people were desperate. Every day without rain was a reminder of God's judgment. In the middle of that suffering, the name of Elijah appeared again. After years in hiding, he returned with a message that would change everything. He sent word to King Ahab to meet with him. When Ahab saw Elijah, he did not greet him with respect. His voice was filled with anger. "Are you the one troubling Israel?" he said. But Elijah did not step back. He answered firmly, "I am not the one, but you and your father's house. You have abandoned God's commandments and followed Baal." Those words were like a sword. No one spoke to the king that way. But Elijah was not afraid. Then he proposed a challenge, a confrontation that would prove who the true God was. He asked that all the people gather on Mount Carmel. He also ordered that the prophets of Baal be brought, the same ones protected by Queen Jezebel. Ahab agreed. Maybe he thought it would be a chance to prove that Baal had power. Maybe his pride led him to accept. The day arrived. Mount Carmel was filled with people. It was a decisive moment. On one side stood Elijah, alone. On the other, hundreds of prophets of Baal. Silence covered the place. Elijah spoke to the people. "How long will you keep wavering? If God is the true one, follow him. But if Baal is, then follow him." No one answered. Then he explained the challenge. 2 altars would be prepared, one for Baal and one for God. Each group would place a sacrifice, but they would not light a fire. The God who answered with fire from heaven would be the true one. The prophets of Baal went first. They prepared their altar. They placed the sacrifice. Then they began to cry out. They shouted, danced, and cut themselves. They begged their God to respond. Hours passed, but nothing happened. Elijah watched in silence. At noon he began to speak with irony. "Shout louder. Maybe your God is busy or sleeping." But there was no answer. The sun began to go down. The prophets were exhausted, but the sky remained silent. Then it was Elijah's turn. He repaired the altar of God that was in ruins. He placed the stones. He prepared the wood. He set the sacrifice. But then he did something unexpected. He ordered water to be brought, and he poured it over the altar. Not once, but several times. The water soaked everything, even filling a trench around it. It was impossible for that altar to catch fire by human means. The people watched in amazement. Then Elijah prayed. It was not a long prayer. He did not shout or panic. He simply spoke with confidence. He asked God to answer so the people would know who the true God was. At that moment, heaven responded. Fire came down. It consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even the water. The people fell face down. "God is the true one," they said. It was a powerful moment. The prophets of Baal were defeated. Their deception was exposed. The people recognized the truth. Ahab was there. He saw everything. He could not deny what had happened, but his heart did not change. After that event, Elijah told Ahab to prepare, because rain was coming. And it did. The sky which had been closed for years, filled with clouds. The wind blew, and the rain fell heavily. The land came back to life. But the story did not end there. When Jezebel heard what had happened, she was filled with anger. She did not feel repentance, but a desire for revenge. She sent a message to Elijah. She said she would kill him. Elijah, despite his great faith, became afraid. He fled into the wilderness. This showed that even the strongest can become weak. Meanwhile, Ahab returned to his palace. He had seen a miracle. He had witnessed the power of God, but he chose to ignore it. His life continued under the influence of Jezebel. He did not make a firm decision. He did not change his path. The moment on Mount Carmel could have been a new beginning, but it was not. Ahab returned to his routine of power, alliances, and wrong decisions. The people slowly went back to their normal lives, although many did not forget what they had seen. That day was marked in history. It was clear proof of who held the true power, but it was also a demonstration of the hardness of the human heart. Ahab had the opportunity to change, but he chose not to, and that decision would have consequences. Time moved forward, and the destiny of the king began to take shape, a destiny that would not be of peace, but of judgment. The reign of Ahab continued between apparent victories and invisible defeats. Even though he had seen the power of God on Mount Carmel, his heart remained tied to his own desires and to the influence of Jezebel. Years passed. There were wars, alliances, and moments of stability. But nothing was able to change what was inside him. One day, something happened that would completely reveal his character. Near Ahab's palace in Jezreel lived a man named Naboth. He had a vineyard that had belonged to his family for generations. It was a valuable inheritance, not only because of the land, but because of its meaning. Ahab saw that vineyard and desired it. He thought it would be perfect to turn it into a garden, so he decided to speak with Naboth. He offered to buy it or exchange it for a better one. But Naboth refused. It was not out of rebellion. It was out of obedience. God's law did not allow the family inheritance to be sold in that way. Ahab did not accept the answer. He returned home sad and angry. He lay down, turned his face to the wall, and refused to eat. It was the behavior of a man who was not used to hearing no. When Jezebel saw him like that, she asked what was wrong. Ahab told her what had happened. Jezebel did not share his doubts. For her, the king's power was above any law. She did not understand why a simple man could refuse a king. So she decided to act. Without Ahab stopping her, she took his name and authority. She wrote letters to the leaders of the city. She ordered them to organize a false trial against Naboth. The plan was cruel. They were to accuse him of blasphemy, find false witnesses, declare him guilty and condemn him to death. And that is exactly what they did. Naboth was falsely accused. The witnesses lied. The people believed the accusation. He was taken outside the city and stoned to death. Everything happened in silence, without defense, without justice. When Jezebel heard that Naboth was dead, she went to Ahab and told him to take the vineyard. Ahab did not ask questions. He did not investigate. He did not object. He simply went and took what he wanted. That moment was decisive. It did not only show his weakness, it showed his complicity. He allowed a terrible injustice to satisfy his desire. But God did not remain silent. He sent Elijah again. The prophet found Ahab in the vineyard. The king was enjoying what he had taken. Then Elijah spoke. "You have killed and also taken possession," he said. The words carried great weight. Elijah announced God's judgment. He said that in the same place where dogs licked the blood of Naboth, they would also lick the blood of Ahab. He also declared that the king's house would be destroyed, that his family would suffer consequences, and that Jezebel would have a shameful end. It was a clear sentence. For the first time in a long time, Ahab reacted differently. He tore his clothes. He dressed in sackcloth. He fasted. He walked in humility. It seemed like a moment of repentance. God saw this, and he decided to delay part of the judgment. He did not cancel it, but allowed it to happen not in Ahab's days, but in the days of his sons. This showed that even in the middle of his wickedness, there was still space to recognize his error. But it was not a complete change. Ahab's heart did not truly transform. It was only a passing moment. Time continued. The king kept ruling. He went to war with other kings. In one of those battles, he had the opportunity to completely defeat an important enemy, but he did not. He spared the life of an enemy king named Ben-Hadad, even though God had ordered otherwise. This was also disobedience. A prophet confronted him for this decision. He told him that because he had let the enemy live, his own life would be taken in his place. It was another warning. But Ahab was already used to hearing warnings without changing. His life was full of wasted opportunities, moments when he could have chosen the right path. But he did not. He had power. He had wealth. He had knowledge of the truth. But he chose to ignore it. His sons were growing up in that environment. Ahaziah and Joram watched everything. They learned from their father. Ahab's legacy was not only personal, it extended to the next generation. The story was moving toward its end, an end that had already been announced. Naboth's death did not go without consequence. It was the moment that sealed the king's destiny. From that point on, the judgment was in motion, and nothing could stop it. Time moved forward, and the reign of Ahab was coming to an end. He had lived years of power, wrong decisions, and ignored warnings. Even though at times he showed signs of humility, he never truly changed. The kingdom remained in fragile stability. External threats continued, and political alliances became more important. In that context, Ahab decided to join forces with the king of Judah, a man named Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat was different. He sought God and tried to do what was right. But he made a mistake by allying himself with Ahab. Both kings decided to go to war against Syria to recover a city called Ramoth-Gilead. Before going, Jehoshaphat asked something important. He asked if there was a prophet of God they could consult. Ahab answered yes, but with annoyance. There was a man named Micaiah, son of Imlah, but Ahab said he hated him because he never prophesied anything good about him. Even so, Jehoshaphat insisted on hearing from him. Before calling Micaiah, Ahab gathered many prophets. All of them said the same thing: "Go up to battle, and you will have victory." Their words sounded good, but they were not true. Jehoshaphat sensed something was wrong. He did not feel peace in those messages. So he asked to hear a true prophet of God. Micaiah was called. Before speaking to the kings, a messenger suggested that he say the same as the others. But Micaiah refused. When he stood before Ahab and Jehoshaphat, he first spoke with irony. "Go up, you will succeed." But Ahab recognized the tone. He knew it was not sincere, so he demanded the truth. And Micaiah spoke. He said he saw Israel scattered like sheep without a shepherd. It was a clear image. The king would die. He also explained that the other prophets had been deceived. They were not speaking the truth. Those words filled the place with tension. Ahab became angry. He did not want to hear that. He ordered Micaiah to be imprisoned until his return. But the prophet left one final warning: "Keep. If you return alive, God has not spoken through me." Despite everything, Ahab decided to go to battle, but he was afraid. So he made a strange decision. He disguised himself. He wanted to avoid being recognized on the battlefield. He thought he could escape his fate that way. Meanwhile, he asked Jehoshaphat to wear his royal robes. It was a dangerous strategy. On the battlefield, the enemy searched for the king of Israel. When they saw Jehoshaphat dressed as a king, they went after him. But when they realized he was not Ahab, they turned away. Ahab thought his plan had worked. He believed he had escaped, but his destiny was already set. In the middle of the battle, an enemy soldier shot an arrow at random. He was not aiming at anyone in particular. The arrow flew through the air, and it found its target. It entered through a gap in Ahab's armor. It was a precise strike. The king was wounded. He asked to be taken out of the battle, but the fight continued. He was held up in his chariot, bleeding, as the day went on. The blood flowed slowly. The sun began to set, and Ahab died. That was how his life ended. Not in glory, not in victory, but in silence. When his body was taken to Samaria, they washed his chariot, and the dogs licked his blood, just as it had been foretold. The word of God was fulfilled. The disguise did not save him. The strategy did not change his destiny. What he had sown, he reaped. His death was not only the end of a man, it was the fulfillment of a warning that had been ignored many times. The king who had many chances to change did not do it. The king who heard the truth rejected it. The king who saw miracles chose to ignore them. His story was coming to an end, but his legacy would continue. Because the decisions of a leader do not end with his death. They continue to affect others, and the house of Ahab still had debts to pay. The judgment was not over. It had only just begun. The death of Ahab was not the end of his story. It was only the beginning of the consequences that his decisions would leave on his family and on the entire kingdom of Israel. His body was taken to Samaria, the city that had witnessed his power and his failures. There he was buried, but his name no longer represented authority or respect. It became a warning, just as Elijah had announced. His blood was licked by dogs. It was not an honorable death. It was the fulfillment of a word that could not be avoided. Ahab had ruled for about 22 years. His exact age is not known, but his life was marked more by his decisions than by the number of his years. During his reign, he had children. Among them, to stand out, Ahaziah, who took the throne after his death, and Joram, who would also rule later. Both grew up under the influence of their father and Jezebel, and that was the problem. Ahab's legacy was not only personal, it was generational. Ahaziah followed in his father's steps. He did not seek God. He ruled in a similar way, repeating the same mistakes. His reign was short. He died after a fall in his house. Joram also reigned. Although at times he tried to correct certain things, he never fully turned away from the path of his family. The shadow of Ahab remained. But God's judgment was not finished. The words spoken against his house were still standing. Years later, a man named Jehu arose. He was chosen to carry out that judgment. Jehu was not an ordinary king. He was raised with a clear mission, to destroy the house of Ahab. And he did. Joram, son of Ahab, was confronted and killed. His body was thrown into the field that had belonged to Naboth, the same place where one of Ahab's greatest sins had begun. Nothing was accidental. It was justice. Then came the turn of Jezebel, the woman who had influenced the king so deeply, who had promoted idolatry and violence. When Jehu arrived at the city, Jezebel tried to appear strong. She prepared herself, looked out from a window, and spoke with arrogance. But her time had ended. She was thrown down from above. Her body fell to the ground again, and the dogs devoured her. Just as it had been announced, the house of Ahab was destroyed. His descendants were eliminated. His lineage came to an end. Everything that had been built on injustice fell. The power that once seemed firm disappeared. The name that had once been feared was forgotten. But his story did not disappear. It remained as a lesson. Ahab was not a king without opportunities. He had many. He listened to prophets. He saw miracles. He received clear warnings. He even had moments when he showed humility. But he did not persevere. That was his failure. It was not a lack of knowledge. It was a lack of decision. He allowed others to influence him more than the truth. He allowed his desires to be stronger than what was right. He allowed power to blind him, and that led him to his end. The life of Ahab teaches that it is not enough to know what is right. It must be lived. It is not enough to have moments of repentance. There must be real change. It is not enough to hear the truth. It must be obeyed. His story also shows that the decisions of one person can affect many: his family, his kingdom, his future. Everything was marked by his actions. Ahab could have been remembered as a great king. He had the power to become one. But he chose a different path, and that path led him to destruction. Today, his name is still remembered, not as an example to follow, but as a warning, because even the most powerful man can fall if he chooses to ignore the truth. And so ends the story of a king who had everything, but lost everything, for not choosing what was right. If this message has touched your heart, you are invited to join this family of faith. Subscribe to this channel and join us each week to continue learning from the stories and teachings God has for us. Turn on the notification bell so you do not miss any video. Thank you for being here, and may God bless your life.